Hello, Dr. Cisse covering anatomy and physiology. Today we'll be covering the muscles of the neck and trunk. So on the left, you see the bones of the neck and the trunk, including the vertebral column with the cervical here, the thoracic vertebrae, the lumbar vertebrae, the sacrum, and the coccyx at the bottom here. Then on the anterior, like the front side, you see the sternum and the ribs. So we'll be covering muscles between these bones, on top of the bones, and below the bones. On the back side, we'll cover the muscles covering the vertebral column, left and right, and the top, the superficial muscles. So on the right, you see that here, we'll be covering the neck and the trunk. So the trunk will be doing the anterior, which is the front, and the posterior, which is the back. So in this video, the questions we're going to be answering will be the difference between myology and kinesiology, the three types of muscle, why do athletes train on high altitude, the difference between agonist and antagonist, and the sternocleidomastoid muscle working on ipsilateral or contralateral. Now let's talk about the muscles of the neck. On the neck, below this, we have the cervical vertebrae. How many? 7. The first one is the atlas, C1, and the second one is the axis, C2. Now, you see a very prominent muscle here, the sternocleidomastoid muscle. Why is it called such? The sterno, because it comes from the sternum, cleido, from the clavicle, mastoid, to the mastoid process of the temporal bone, the mastoid process of the temporal bone. Then here, we see all these scalene muscles. We say the scalene muscles are attaching the cervical vertebrae to the first and the second rib, scalene muscle. Then you see the digastric muscle, two gastric belly, because it has two belly, and this is the posterior belly of the digastric muscle. The anterior belly is on here. Right here, anterior belly. Then you see the hyoglossus coming from the hyoid. Anytime you hear the word glossus, it means what? The tongue. Glossus, tongue. So hyoglossus coming from the hyoid to the tongue. The stylohyoid, from the styloid process of the temporal bone to the hyoid bone. Malohyoid, the malo means the molar, the teeth, parting from the back of the mouth to the hyoid. So the malo is just the muscles coming from the tooth socket area to the hyoid bone. Then the thyroid, from the thyroid gland, the thyroid is right here, to the hyoid bone. And then the omohyoid, look at it, if you follow it, it comes all the way to the clavicle. So the clavicle, not the clavicle, the scapula, sorry, the back of the scapula. See, because the clavicle is here, but it comes from the scapula. The word omo means scapula, the omohyoid, the scapula coming to the hyoid bone. Then the sternohyoid coming from the sternum to the hyoid. So all these bones will have some kind of hyoid, just all the one coming to the hyoid bone. The hyoid bone is on the cervical area of the vertebrae. Then you see the muscles acting on the back of the neck. You see the neck flexor and the neck extender. So we have the neck flexor, we have the sternocleidomastoid muscle coming from the mastoid process to the front, the sternum, the clavicle, back to the mastoid process here of the temporal bone, and then the scalene coming from the vertebrae to the first and second rib, scalene muscle. Then the neck extenders coming from the cervical, the occipital bone here, superior nuclear line of the occipital bone, and the inferior nuclear left occipital bone. We have the trapezius. We're going to show another picture with a better view of trapezius. The splenius capitis, we're going to show another picture of it, and the semispinalis capitis. So you see the trapeze here, looks like a trapezoid, right? Well, I'll show this on the next slide. So just to show the vertebral column again, the cervical, thoracic, lumbar, and sacrum and coccyx. And we say the lumbar vertebrae are thicker, the body of the vertebra are thicker. But think about it, the more you go down, the heavier your body becomes, so the bones will have to be thicker to protect you. Also the thoracic cage, also you see here the sternum with the manubrium, the body, and the xiphoid process of the sternum. Then the ribs, you see the first to the 12th rib, 11, 12 ribs are floating, and the 8 to 12 are false, right? So 11 to 12 are floating. Of course, you see the ribs here, and then we say that the clavicle and the scapula are not part of the axial skeleton, they're part of appendicular. So we don't consider them as part of the trunk. Here, the muscle acting on the vertebral column, you see the semispinalis capitis. Capitis means what, the head, coming, it's the back here. The semispinalis cervicis on the neck area, the semispinalis thoracis on the thoracic area, right? And then we have the spinalis under it. You see the spinalis coming from here all the way down, up here. Then the iliocostalis and longissimus. Now let's practice them one by one. The splenius capitis coming from the superior nuchal line here on the lateral side to the thoracic vertebrae, the splenius capitis. Splenius capitis. Now the semispinalis, we have 3 of them: capitis, cervicis, thoracis. And then we have the spinalis, semispinalis, spinalis. And then the iliocostalis, longissimus. So these 3 are the erector spinae muscle. Why? Because they allow the back to stand up, to keep you straight up. Then we have the muscle of respiration, the external intercostal, and the internal. Of course, the internal is inside, external is outside. Then the back muscle here, the purpose of this slide, actually, the lecture, is to understand these muscles. These are going to be the muscles on the exam, right? So the neck and back and gluteal muscles. So from the top, you see this trapezius muscle. It looks like a trapezoid. Look at the shape right here, from here all the way here. Now on the right side, they just remove it so you can see the ones at the bottom. Now the deltoid muscle is not part of the neck and back. It's just part of the arm, but it's just part, it's going to be a muscle that we need to know. So I'll just like to repeat it. Now you see the erector spinae muscle. It's the group of muscle. You see the longissimus dorsi, the very back. Latissimus dorsi, the very large one here. We have the gluteal muscle. Gluteus maximus is right here, the big one, the buttock. And then the gluteus medius is superior right here, and the gluteus minimus is under right here. So gluteus medius, right here, right here. So the gluteus minimus here. And then you have the teres major and teres minor will be the muscles here. I just made them. They don't fall into the same level because I was just trying to put the numbers, the names bigger here so you can see. If you look at here, the teres major and minor are not part of the back muscle. We just see them because they're part of the scapula, right? And which is part of the arm. We'll just talk about them so we can practice the name of the muscles here. So again, we got splenius capitis, the splenius capitis right here, the semispinalis capitis right here under, and then we have these muscles on the scapula. The pectoralis major is going to be a muscle on the chest here, the front part, the anterior part. The external abdominal oblique, internal abdominal oblique, transverse abdominal, and rectus abdominis. These are going to be the 4 muscles we need to know here. So the external abdominal oblique will be the muscle that will go with the direction of your hand in your pocket. The internal oblique is going to be the opposite direction. The transverse will go horizontal, and the rectus will be vertical. So this is the rectus abdominis right here, right? The internal abdominal oblique right here, internal, the opposite, and the external will be this way, coming in the direction of the hand pocket. And then the pectoralis minor will be under the major. Inguinal ligament will be the ligament connecting the external oblique muscle, the aponeurosis of the external oblique. And then the external abdominal oblique, obviously we saw them here again. Then, of course, we need to know about the ribs and the anatomy of the ribs. All right, I hope, let me see if I go back and see if there's something very important. So the front here, we see, okay, the deltoid is not part of this. It's just, I'm just showing you the platysma also, the trapezius also. That's why I put them in black. But you see the pectoralis major here and the minor under it and the four muscles here. If I go to the back here also, you will see the serratus anterior here, right? And then the serratus posterior on the back here. What else you need to see? The erector spinae muscle. They're a group of muscle, right? If I go back, you see the same thing here. So the iliocostalis, longissimus, and spinalis. So these are going to be the erector spinae muscle. All right, see you in class.